WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. And yes, we're still on AM 1570 radio traditional each and every day. We're going to be doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour this week. North of the city, Cooper's North. We're going to be, we can go to Cooper's downtown. We got Chowhound, but I haven't been to Cooper's North. And as I've moved out into the county, we'll be there from 2 until 5 on Friday, having a delicious crab cake, an ice cold refreshment or two, probably some gumbo before it's all over. It's all brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. I have the Ravens scratch-offs to be giving away this week. We will be talking lots and lots of Ravens this week. There's no doubt about that. Our friends at Goodwill, our friends at Window Nation, and, of course, the Restaurant Association of Maryland. It is Restaurant Week. Get out there. Take advantage of Restaurant Week this week. Luke, some of the milk is curdled a little bit in Restaurant Week when things go the way they are. I have a piping hot cup of Justin Tucker Rofo coffee here. I got my in my Cole Roofing mug, and I'm just going to sit back, man. I wrote a column this piece on the aftermath, and who knows what the effect of this is going to be, but we saw something on Sunday we've never seen before and we'll probably never see again, right?
Well, that's actually not true. We saw this 25 years ago at Memorial Stadium. The Ravens jumped out to a 21-point lead on the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was the famous Cordell Stewart running wild game. But the difference with that was the Ravens took that 21-point lead early in the second quarter, and Pittsburgh had close to 3 quarters to come back. This was a case of the Ravens led by 21 with, just over 15 minutes ago. Lamar Jackson runs wild in the way Cordell Stewart did way back when, and you're thinking, oh, that's the exclamation point on what was a Superman performance by Lamar, a fun home opener, and it was going to be a purple party in the fourth quarter. I mean, we could all envision that. It was very 2019-like in that way. However, when your defense completely collapses and when you can't run the football other than Lamar Jackson, well, we get what happened in the fourth quarter on Sunday, which was hard to describe. Just an absolute utter collapse and just a crushing kind of loss. It's week 2, and they're fine in the big picture sense as far as, hey, everyone in the AFC North lost on Sunday. You're feeling fine in that regard, but I go back to what this team's identity is supposed to be beyond just saying, well, Lamar Jackson's the best player and he can carry them on their back. They still need to finish football games. And how do they typically do that? How have they done that the last few years? It's been with a historic running game that can drain the clock, steal the soul of your opponent, and eliminate any chance they have of coming back, and a defense that, frankly, doesn't let the ball go over its head. Well, they didn't do those things on Sunday, and specifically in the fourth quarter, and you're left at the end of the day completely stunned at Tua Tagovailoa throwing 6 touchdown passes. It's even processing it the morning after, the day after, couple days after. I think it's very, very difficult to look at that and still say, what the heck happened?
Well, what the heck happened was something that John Harbaugh over 15 seasons. I mean, I said this is sort of a historic thing that he will be coaching the rest of his career. That, you feel good about a 7-point lead or a 10-point lead or a 2-touchdown lead or a fourth quarter 3-touchdown lead at home. All of these things that sort of withered away, and he looked a little beleaguered in the post game. He looked a little like didn't really have words for it and was trying to just get off stage and figure out how they're going to go put this thing back together against the Patriots. But as I wrote in my column, and I love when you've been saying that for always, as I wrote on WNST, as I wrote in my columness, the aftermath of this and how they respond and the things he said, the very visceral thing he said, which is just, this isn't good enough. He said it to you in the post game that this isn't acceptable. But they were really good for 40 minutes, right? Like, you could see how good they can be. Now, that being said, the offensive line is an Achilles heel and not being able to run the ball and not having a Gus bus, right? You don't realize you don't have a Gus bus till you have a 3-touchdown lead and it's the fourth quarter. I didn't write about that. But then there's the secondary and the health of the team. And I could sit here and roast the young defensive coordinator. We can all go after Greg Roman. He would kick him. We've got a fine tradition going back to Matt Cavanaugh and Cam Cameron to kicking offensive coordinators around here, right? I'm looking for the horses. When there's no Marlon Humphrey out there and there's no Ronnie Stanley out there and they are your highest. I mean, when your best players aren't on the field, or when they drop a ball like Mark Andrews did at one point, and look, Lamar fumbled on the 1 foot line, right, on a play that should have been 7 the other way. So they squandered opportunities. They had a lot of mistakes, even being up 3 touchdowns, to say, well, we got some good film this week. But this is a different kind of thing. I think certainly this is a week where the Calais Campbells and the Josh Bynes and leaders, they need an Eric Weddle this week, right? Having those kinds of stabilizing influences on the team. This is where Mark Andrews this is where Lamar steps up. I mean, all these guys that have some sort of amnesia, because if you pointed out, like, we're going to be talking about this all week saying, well, that's the damnedest thing. I wonder if it's a trend, or I wonder if they're the football team we saw the first 40 minutes, or whether they can be that, given that they can't run the ball and that the secondary probably, given health and where we are, I'm not feeling great about it, Luke, all of a sudden. I'm really not.
Yeah, I just have a tough time putting it all on injuries, though. They've spent so many resources on safety, right? I mean, the ball is going over their head. I can understand if Miami's grinding out 14 play drives and you're keeping it in front of you and you're making tackles, but you're giving a lot of cushion. I understand that. But you have Marcus Williams back there. You spent the 14th overall pick on Kyle Hamilton. You have Chuck Clark back there. I'm sorry. I understand Marlon Humphrey wasn't out there for a good portion of the fourth quarter, but we're not talking about a game that was tied going into the fourth quarter and then suddenly you give up a touchdown or two. They had a 3-touchdown cushion. That can't happen. I'm sorry. There were too many good football players that were still on the field to allow that to happen. And what you mentioned about the running game, well, they didn't have J.K. Dobbins all last year. They didn't have Gus Edwards all last year. They didn't have Ronnie Stanley all last year. And they still ran the ball much better than what we've seen over these first couple of weeks, Nestor. I mean, anyone not named Lamar Jackson is averaging under 3 yards a carry right now. That can't happen. That's unacceptable for what's supposed to be a Greg Roman offense. And look, I know Lamar was asked about this in the locker room, and he kind of talked about, well, it's this isn't the same old Ravens. It's the new way of the NFL. And he's right to a point. But boy, if you can't run even if you're not going to be a run first team, and I'm not buying that the Ravens aren't going to still be a run first team in the big picture, or at least want to be that in the big picture. But we've seen it. I can recall you and I talking about the Chiefs in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, and this is leading up to them losing to Tampa Bay. One knock of the Chiefs at times has been their inability to run the football and not play very good defense, right? They've jumped out to big leads, and then you see them not be able to finish opponents because they can't do those things. If you can't run the ball, at least from a situational standpoint, when it dictates it, whether you're talking about short yardage, as we saw on a number of occasions on Sunday, including, yes, that first offensive drive where the Ravens had 4 shots inside the 2-yard line and could not get the ball in the end zone. And clearly that came back to haunt them. Or we're talking about the fourth down play in that fourth quarter where they're trying to move inside the Miami 40 and they couldn't do that. If you can't do those things, it is going to cost you at some point in time. We've talked about the Ravens, their 4-minute offense, their fourth quarters where they've been able to protect leads and put together 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10-minute drives in the fourth quarter where it was still a close game. And they completely crushed the soul of their opponent. Why? Because they keep moving the chains and their opponent never even gets the football back. We didn't see anything that even came close to that on Sunday. And we saw by the time they got to that last drive where Justin Tucker did kick a field goal, they had all but abandoned the run. I think they ran once on that final drive that they had.
It's almost like they're running a run and shoot offense or something.
Well, and look, I get it. I'm not saying you keep running into a brick wall, but that just showed that you can't just pass and pass and pass and pass and pass and not expect to have some hiccups along the way. You have to have some semblance of balance, and they just did not have that. When you're talking about other than Lamar Jackson's generational ability, and we've talked so much about how much is too much in terms of him running, but no one else is running the football. They had no success whatsoever. Justice Hill was okay. He popped one decent run, but that was it beyond what Lamar gave them. And you look at that, you look at the defense, you look at what this team's supposed identity is, what we thought it was going to be going into 2022. And that's what I wrote about at BaltimorePositive.com late Sunday night, that you look at that and beyond saying, well, Lamar Jackson's Superman and relying on him very heavily, but as far as what their identity is supposed to be to finish that, to complement Lamar Jackson's heroics, it was nowhere to be found on Sunday. And that's just wildly disappointing when you're talking about a game that, to your point, you mentioned they dominated for 45 minutes, but we've seen this plenty of times going back to, I mentioned the 1996-97 Ravens. That was a team that had lots of leads, and they'd get to the fourth quarter, and then guess what would happen? They couldn't run the football, and they couldn't play defense, and they'd end up blowing the lead more often than not. So
I'd wind up in Marvin's office the next week with a lunch with Jim Schwartz pointing up, watching Donnie Brady and Steve Osborne, and I mean, just chase footballs. And look, Tua was pretty good, right?
Sure.
And certainly weapons. Those guys are not to borrow one from Joe Flacco on Sunday, but elite. They are elite. The receiving core and Gesicki, I mean, what they put together there. I don't know about Mostert, but I mean, you can't have Tyreek Hill at every position, right? I mean, but where they're a threatening offense, especially if they can protect Tua a little bit.
No question. And that's another element of the defense that, unlike the Jets game where Joe Flacco was harassed throughout the game, very minimal pressure on Tua. They got to him a little bit here and there. Justin Houston had a sack. They got a little bit of pressure here and there, but not much.
Well, the backside was a mess. You knew that going in. Come on now, right? I mean, in pregame, you knew the question here is who's going to be on the backside.
Yeah, right? well, but at the same time, Marcus Peters was back there. Marlon Humphrey, it's not as though he missed the entire game. I mean, Marcus Williams had the interceptions. That kind of masked the fact that Miami had moved the ball on them a good bit. By the way,
they were miraculous too, right? Like they weren't just interceptions, right place, right time, good breed. I mean, they were physical, crazy, acrobatic. I mean,
sure.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. They were lucky, but good in that way.
Well, they were spectacular interceptions. And again, that's something else. I mentioned that we should be talking about Lamar Jackson being Superman. We should be talking about the fact that Rashad Bateman, kind of looks like a number one wide receiver. I mean, look at the speed that he showed on the slant and taking it all the way to the house for a touchdown. We should be talking about the passing game, looking at how it's looked. We should be talking about the fact that Marcus Williams had two spectacular Ed Reed-like interceptions. I mean, he has 3 picks. He had 3 picks in his first, 6 quarters of football as a Raven. I mean, that hasn't happened before. We should be talking about those elements, and instead we're talking about this historic collapse. So that's what makes this so frustrating. And again, you don't want to panic. It's 2 games. I understand that, but these are some trends that are unsettling because, okay, is J.K. Dobbins going to come back and look like J.K. Dobbins? I mean, if he looks like that guy, then okay, I'll buy it getting better. But
where's the offensive line anyway? You know what I mean? Well, it's a symphony, dude. It's not one thing. When you're blowing that, when you're putting that kind of tape up on the fourth quarter, and you look and you say, is it fitness? Do we have good enough guys? Who are the guys out there at the end of the game? And what the hell are we thinking? Talking ourselves into believing that we can play left tackle like this and win.
Yeah. Well, and that's the problem when your $100 million left tackle gets hurt 2 days after he signs an extension 2 years ago. I mean, again, what's Dobbins going to look like? What's Ronnie Stanley going to look like? The secondary, I mean, they've lost Kyle Fuller for the season. He was at best going to be their number 3 corner. Marcus Peters is back. We assume Marlon Humphrey, it's a groin issue. I don't think it's, season altering at this point, but when he's not on the field, clearly you're a lesser defense. But for me, I do point to the coaching. Wink Martindale, the Ravens parted ways with Wink Martindale, who had put together some really good defenses over a stretch of time from 2018 through 2020. And then last year, well, you saw who was playing against the Cincinnati Bengals in what was it, week 17, the day after Christmas, or week 16, I guess it was, the day after Christmas. And, between COVID and injuries, I mean, they had practice squad guys that they had just signed that were playing meaningful snaps against the Bengals. This wasn't quite that, right? I mean, they still had more good players out on the field than they did at that point late last season. But the Ravens deemed that it was necessary to make a change. So Mike McDonald comes in, and look, I'm not going to pick on him too much, but at the same time, these guys didn't know what the hell they were doing on the back end in the fourth quarter. I mean, it was utter confusion, miscommunication, guys being beat, guys not in the right position. I mean, that can't happen. I mean, you can't look at that and just shrug. I mean, you had a 3-touchdown lead, and you blew it. You gave up 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. I mean, that just can't happen. It can't happen. And that's to take nothing away from Tua. That's to fully acknowledge Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are unique. They're different kind of wide receivers. But boy, again, when you're just letting the ball go over your head, at least make them go 10, 11 plays, right? At least make them take some time. The clock should have been the Ravens' friend in that fourth quarter, that you don't give up a 50-plus yard touchdown. Keep it in front of you, make tackles, make them keep moving the chains. I don't know if methodical, because they're throwing the ball, certainly, but you're not allowing these huge chunk plays where they're scoring in a matter of a minute or two, the way that we were seeing that on Sunday. I mean, to borrow a line from John Harbaugh, going back to what was that, the 2015 season, I think it was, what we saw in the fourth quarter, boy, that was well below the bar as far as what you expect from a Baltimore Ravens defense.
We talk so much about fitness and getting these guys healthy and the special grass, and they did incredible things. Kind of reminds me of the last presidential. We've done incredible things with health and with better, making our players better. And here we are in week 2 again, and I'm like, who's playing? Yeah. And who's on the field, and what is a $150 million player if you can't get him on the field, which to some degree, may feed into Steve Bisciotti's psyche about giving Lamar guaranteed money when Ronnie Stanley's not out there guaranteeing protection for Lamar on a weekly basis. And the running back, look, they play this game with the media all week about who's going to play and the injury report, and this guy's probable, and this guy's questionable, and this guy might go, and this guy might not go. But then they got to go out and play, and they have to be ready. And you see all the shenanigans they're playing with the secondary and who's up, and you're guessing, and Zrebek's guessing, and everybody's guessing as to what happens. The fitness part of an 83-degree day where Tyreek Hill's off getting fluids, right? I mean, the fourth quarter, they look gassed to me, dude. And you talk so much about rotation and 6-7 guys on the D-line. They lost Means halfway through the game. The linebacking core is not very good to begin with. They have all of these safeties, right? And you saw Chuck Clark make a play or two, and you certainly saw DeMarcus Williams make a couple of plays and also drop one, as did Xavier Howard, too. I mean, there was so much going on in that game. It did remind me of the Bills-Oilers game in not just the final score, but just even with the final score, there were lost 6-point opportunities on both sides of it could have been 50 to 49 before it was all over with. But I would just say fitness, health, concerns about getting a full unit on the field, if at all, and the Nick Boyle mystery. I mean, there's a lot going on here with roster and with expectation, not from the fans, but for them to think that Marlon Humphrey's going to be on the field in the fourth quarter, right? And when that doesn't happen, bad things happen.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, to go back to the fitness thing, I mean, it's like we said, when that many guys are rotating, it should keep guys fresh. I mean, they had 3 players that played 100% of the snaps: Chuck Clark, Marcus Williams, Patrick Queen. Okay, so it's not as though we're talking about someone suddenly playing more snaps than they're used to. Although I would say Odafe Owe had to play 58 snaps. Justin Houston had to play 49 because, well, when Steven Means goes down, those are your only 2 listed outside linebackers, although at this point, Malik Harrison's playing more Sam than inside linebacker.
And by the way, can we say this on Houston, too? The first 15 plays are different than the last 15 plays, aren't they?
No question.
When you're 35 years old, they just are. They just are, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not 35, but yeah, anyone that's, late 20s on. Late 20s is not young for the NFL, right? So you're talking.
It feels like Justin Houston's 32 to me.
Well,
I said 30. But
he
he
is in his early
30.
No, he's 30, 32, 33, but he wasn't 30.
32. Okay,
but he wasn't 35 is what I was saying.
Oh, fair enough.
My overall point is you kind of look at this thing, and you just mentioned it, between some of the injuries that they do have, and we've talked about this. This roster is really unbalanced. I mean, think about the resources that are pumped into safety. I mean, they have, Geno Stone is their fourth safety, who probably could play on some teams around the NFL. They drafted Kyle Hamilton after they already had Chuck Clark, and they gave Marcus Williams a $70 million contract, which, by the way, is looking pretty good so far, right? I mean, 3 picks. But you look at that, you look at the depth there, but then before Stephen Means got hurt, 3 outside linebackers on the roster. You look at inside linebacker, they have a boatload of inside linebackers, primarily because those backups all play special teams. But, well, what's that mean for your edge rush? What does that mean at other positions? We've talked about wide receiver. You mentioned Nick Boyle and, the mystery there, which, you just wonder at this point if current 2022 Nick Boyle is just what he is, and he's not going to be the 2019 Nick Boyle after the horrendous knee injury a couple years ago. So you just look at this thing, and boy, the Ravens on paper have some very distinct strengths, but also some very significant question marks as it pertains to their depth. So when you do have a couple injuries, and we've talked about this, it does make things a little more difficult. But again, I can't just sign off on shrugging your shoulders about Tua throwing 6 touchdowns because Marlon Humphrey was in and out of the on and off the field in the second half of Sunday's game. I mean, you still had a lot of money, a lot of resources pumped into the back end of that defense that did not come through. Some of the strides that we hoped we were seeing in week 1 with Joe Flacco being tormented in the pocket, that didn't show up in week 2. And, that's a Dolphins offensive line that was playing without its right tackle. There are some questions about the quality of their guards, in the same way we were talking about the Jets guards having so many issues against Matt Abike and Michael Pierce. That didn't show up. So you get to a point where, even with everything we're talking about, and you get the turnovers, you get the interceptions against Tua, that you're in position to just, I don't mean literally sit on a lead, but protect a lead, right? And saw nothing that even resembled that. Again, the ball's going over your head to the magnitude that we saw it. I mean, that doesn't add up. And I just can't, I can't just explain that away without looking at this thing and wondering, what we thought the identity was supposed to be of this football team is not matching up with what we've seen over these first 2 weeks of the season, even considering the fact that they won on opening day. You have a loss like what we witnessed on Sunday. A lot of questions moving forward here as the Ravens try to get better ahead of New England.
All right, I'm going to call a little timeout right now. Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke. You can find him anywhere the internet is sold and served. Of course, we're together out at WNST AM 1570 on the radio, old school, as well as at BaltimorePositive.com. I have begun my column writings. Luke will be writing all sorts of writings of the Orioles' sort of rather demise here this week, and it really does become football season. Patriots, Bills ahead, much, much more conversation ahead. The Maryland Crab Cake Tour stopping at Cooper's North on Friday. We hope to see you up at Simone. I mean, there 2 until 5 with Patrick Russell and a bunch of friends. We're gonna invite, we're gonna dust off and get ready for Foxborough around here. Certainly talk some Lamar, talk some health of the team, and Luke will be firing more difficult questions at Coach Harbaugh. I am Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.